Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This is part of our webinar series called Ahead of the Curve, Digital Marketing Tips, Tricks, and Best Practices for Businesses during COVID-19. Before we kick off, let's just do a quick sound check, make sure that we're coming through okay. All right. Let's just see here. Just put in the chat that you can hear us okay, or in the question box. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Excellent. So just a reminder, this session will be recorded. We will be doing a Q&A as well as part of this session, so that make sure you get those questions in the question box over the course of the session, so that we can get to some of those at the end. And certainly we've got some people in behind the scenes that they'll be answering some of those questions as well. We do have a huge participation in our webinar here, so if there are any audio issues that you may have, we just suggest that you log out and then log back in again. That often will fix that, or you have the option of calling in using the call-in number that's provided as well. So let's get started here. Let's just talk a little bit, just to give you a quick introduction about WSI, if this is your first session or maybe you don't know much about us. WSI, we've been around for 25 years. We've literally helped hundreds of thousands of clients in multiple industries like yours. And this series was really something that we wanted to do to be able to give back to businesses, to provide them some strategies. A lot of companies have really been forced into digitization during this COVID lockdown. And so we wanted to take sort of some of our experts from around the world, bring them to businesses to provide them sort of best strategies and tips about how they can go about that process of adding digital into their business. This session today, we've got a great session. Our format of these sessions, we try to keep it short. They're half an hour, so about 20 minutes of content with 10 minutes of Q&A. But our session today is about conversational marketing. The last couple of sessions we were talking about was about communication and really targeting the right personas and the right messaging to that. Today is really about how to use technology to do a better job communicating. And we're going to talk about bots, things like that. I mean, artificial intelligence is growing slowly through things like Siri and Alexa and different devices and things like that. But we're gonna sort of talk a bit about the landscape. What is conversational marketing? And our guest today is no stranger to this. Eric Cook is based out of Michigan. He's an international speaker. He's an author in WSI's best-selling book, Digital Minds, on the topic of conversational marketing. And Eric works with all kinds of different businesses on helping them with their digital. But I do have to say that Eric is a rock star when it comes to the finance and banking industry. He really is an expert in that area and has helped a lot of clients in that sector to really maximize their digital. So Eric, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
You earned your $20. I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words.
Okay, well, I know you got a great session for us today, and we don't have too much time, so I'm just going to turn it over to you so that you can teach us a little bit about conversational marketing.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to pop on my webcam and say hello to everybody in an interest of preserving bandwidth for you all. I'm going to go ahead and drop off the webcam, but certainly still be here for the conversation. And then when we get to the Q&A part of today's presentation, we'll go ahead and we'll fire that back up, and happy to answer any questions that you might have. So we're going to go ahead and hide for now, but we'll be back later. There we go. So in the chapter that I penned for the book, number 7, on conversational marketing and shortening the sales cycle, we're going to kind of cover these 4 main areas and allow for some time at the end. We're going to first define really what conversational marketing means and paint the picture of what the landscape looks like today, but also get into our crystal ball and see a little bit about how it's potentially going to evolve over the future. We're going to discuss the different types of chat bots that are out there. These are the conversational components that you can add to your website through your social channels, landing pages, and a couple of ways that you can get started, at least understanding what a chatbot really should be paying attention to and how you're going to want to structure it within your organization. We'll share the benefits of why chatbots are so powerful, not only from an efficiency perspective and a cost savings perspective, but really the fact that consumers really like messaging and they prefer chatbots over a lot of the other forms of communication. We're going to talk about what's referred to as the uncanny valley and why you need to stay out of that valley and be fully transparent. And if you're not familiar with the term uncanny valley, you will by the end of today's discussion. And then, of course, we've got time for Q&A. So feel free to go ahead and make sure you're throwing those questions into the chat area on your control panel, and we'll spend some time talking about those. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. We want to, and if you take technology out of the equation, the best chance that you have of selling anything to somebody is doing it through a conversation, getting to know them, allowing them to tell you their story, learning what it is that is on their mind. We talked a lot in some of these prior sessions about things like personas and having a profile and what are their pain points and what keeps them up at night. But technology is really about trying to figure the best way to have these conversations on your web, through your social, on your mobile device. One of the best ways to have a conversation, and I'm not going to go into it because Ryan did a great job in one of the first sessions on video, but live video, for example, is a great way to build conversations. You're talking with your customers and your prospects and your ideal target market as opposed to just to them. Synchronous versus asynchronous communication. And so when we think about these ways to create conversations, understanding what really is on their mind, what sorts of questions they're going to have, what answers you can prep ahead of time. So if you're going to be able to incorporate some of these as part of a bot-driven conversation, being able to maybe take 30, 40, 50% of the questions and allow for bot technology and artificial intelligence to answer that. But most of the businesses out there today are still very much thinking about producing content and distributing it to their audience, as opposed to how do I create a way to invite them into that discussion and have that back and forth. And when we build those conversations, that's when we have a much more intimate relationship with our customers. It's going to last longer. It's probably going to have a higher value to it. And you're going to have a much greater degree of customer satisfaction than if you're just embracing the old school, talking to everybody and just distributing information and not asking them to give you information back. So we've been having, we can go to the next slide. We've been having these conversations with devices, and I'm going to press the little mute button on my Alexa device here, because if I say her name out loud, she'll think I'm talking to her. Sometimes I refer to her as Mrs. A. But we've been having conversations on multiple platforms. It started with Apple Siri, then Google came along with Google Voice. It gave us the ability to have Alexa conversations and voice-based search, where we're talking to these devices and asking it questions. Even though these are definitely AI technology-driven responses, they're getting a lot better at giving us the answers that we're looking for. You know, where's the nearest bank? Where can I order a pizza? How much does it cost to do X, Y, or Z? What's the current conversion rate for US dollars to British pounds? We're talking to our devices and getting answers. And so it's a natural extension that consumers are going to want to talk to the businesses in a similar way and get those answers. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to jump right in and start creating Alexa skills or figuring out how you're going to answer questions, through that type of device or a Google Home. But understand that consumer preference is definitely shifting because of all of these other technologies that are making it really easy for us to quote, I'm doing air quotes with my fingers, talk to them and get answers. And now we just want to have that same relationship with the businesses that we're working with their websites, with other means of communication. So in so much as consumers are preferring it, there's a really interesting and very powerful statistic on the next slide that talks about consumers are actually preferring message-based communication when they're interacting with businesses, And most people are actually preferring it over email. And I've got an example of one small community bank that we work with in Kansas here in the United States that has recently implemented a text message solution to be able to quickly communicate with its customers during this COVID-19 small business administration funds deployment, wanting to make sure that they don't get their messages lost in the inbox, and that it very quickly gets to their business customers. And they're doing that through text messaging. And I'll show you a little bit more about that later. But this is just another statistic that reinforces the fact that your customers, they're messaging with their friends, they're messaging with their family. We all know, and I joke, we don't have children, but we have nieces and nephews. If I call them on the phone or send them an email, very rarely do you get a response, but a text message is almost instantaneous. And it's not always a text message. Sometimes it's even other types of messages that we can go ahead and we can send out. So if we go to the next slide, yes, text messaging is certainly a popular way of communicating. One of the things we talked about actually in the pre-show, there's, I don't know if it's really called a social network, but there's an influencer network with people like Gary Vee and some other celebrities and sports stars called Community, that's actually assigning mobile phone numbers when you join that platform. And it allows for these influencers to send a text message to you with a thought, an observation. You can pose a question. And it's basically a social network-like platform, all based off of text messages. And it's about that communication, that back and forth, that conversational capability. But when we talk about messages themselves, we take a look at Facebook. And this is every minute, not every day or every month or even every hour. Over 46 billion messages every minute. And we've got lots of other platforms that are allowing direct message capability. In fact, if you do anything on Instagram and a story that disappears, that story disappears as 24 hours. But if that story inspires somebody who watched it to send you or your business a direct message because it piqued their interest, that direct message, that conversation remains persistent, and it's there for you to carry on even after your story disappears. So Facebook knows, and it validates based off of the activity, that messaging is very, very popular, even to the extent that you can do transactions directly through these platforms and not even have to visit a landing page or go to a website, even, conversational commerce, as they call it. So next slide. One of the questions that we often get is, okay, that all looks really great. I get it, but where do we start? What's like, if I wanted to build a bot or I wanted to have some sort of an automation, how do I track that? Well, one of the things that your WSI consultant can do for you is if you have a website that has search capability on it, most of the time when that search query is done, you're going to have this operator or this parameter, and you can see after this query on Heartland Bank's website, you've got the question mark Q. Now, I'm not going to get into HTML and Google Analytics stuff because that would be a little too complicated and might even get outside of my area of expertise. But you can actually take that query parameter and you can go ahead and you can insert that into Google Analytics or contact your friendly WSI consultant that invited you to today's webinar. You can import that query parameter into your Google Analytics. And when you go into the behavior settings into Google Analytics and you go to Site Search Overview, Google Analytics will actually tell you what people are looking for on your website. So when I run the report for Heartland Bank, I can see that 3 of the top 5 query parameters over the last week have been related to the Paycheck Protection Program, SBA, Paycheck Protection. Businesses are out there looking for information, wanting to know how they can go ahead and apply to get funding to help their businesses succeed. Many of you on the call, those of you that are in the United States, may have gone through that very same process with your community bank, but Heartland knows that this is an active, so any resources, any communication, any information that's on their website, they can modify that and incorporate that into other areas. And we'll see here in just a little bit, they're actually using bot-based technology on their website as well. So next slide. So let's talk a little bit about bots before we show you an example of one. There's really three different types of bots that they can be organized in. One, at the very basic level, is that informational bot, which is what you likely will want to, it's like crawl, walk, run, maybe sprint when you get to the very end when you're talking about the advisory bots. We'll go over those in just a second. But the informational bots are just going to regurgitate information that people are asking questions about because you've done a good job of data mining information like Google Analytics or your FAQs, or just talking with your employees or your call center staff members and saying, what are the typical questions that we get from customers and how can we answer those in a more conversational way, but make that available so people feel like they're getting that information from us in a very comfortable manner, as opposed to having to just read it on a website. You next get into transactional capabilities, and this is the example that I gave you. I'm an avid cyclist, and Facebook knows it because of all the data that it mines on me. But I was presented with an advertisement for a cool little laser light that was a rear tail light, and it caught my attention. It was only like $12. So I clicked the link, and instead of taking me to a landing page, it opened up a chat bot message on Facebook that walked me through the process of collecting my information and my credit card. I bought that laser light for my bicycle directly through a bot. And that bot then sent me notifications as to when that was expected to arrive at my home, shipping and tracking. I don't even know what website it went to. Now, granted, I wouldn't recommend that a bank implement a mortgage through a transactional capability because that's a much more sophisticated, a little bit more involved transaction. But for things like, these lower dollar, easier kind of impulse buys, transactional capability to make it super easy is happening, and it's happening all over the place. The last item is the advisory, and this is where you get into things like Deep Blue, or you get into Watson going on Jeopardy, or Deep Blue beating a grand chess champion. The advisory bots are really rolling in a lot of this artificial intelligence. They're very sophisticated. They learn over time. They base decisions on past interactions and understand the best ways to answer questions based off of prior history. But I wouldn't necessarily think you're going to want to jump right into the advisory. Mine your data. What are the questions? And start with something as simple as just an informational bot to get your feet wet, to put your, dip your toe in the water, and to start making that move towards conversational marketing. So the bank that I already gave you the example of, you can see a couple of screenshots here. If you visit their website, they've got live chat that's present down in the bottom right-hand corner. You click on that, the chat opens up. Hey, I'm interested in getting information about your PPP program. You can even go so far as to implement technology that pulls in Facebook Messenger. And if I'm logged in on my computer as Eric Cook, the chat bot will come up and say, hey, Eric, and it already knows who I am because it's recognizing that I'm already logged into Facebook and it knows who I am. So you're starting off that conversation in even more of a personalized manner. So let's go to the next slide. And I believe we've got our example of our bank. We got a phone call from the marketing director, and she said, my CEO wants to be able to quickly and efficiently send messages to our business customers to make sure that they know what's going on with their loan request and when the government's going to make money available, because we want them to have the most current information from us. So we worked with one of our partners here within the WSI network, a company called Mobile Monkey. If you reach out to your WSI consultant, they can get you a ton of great information about that company. But Mobile Monkey historically had been focused on Facebook chat messages. They have recently rolled out the capability to do text messages. So in less than 24 hours, we had a local area code phone number for the bank. We created a code, we created messages, and they were communicating with their small business customers in real time. And I'm on the list, and they continue to send updates to make sure that their customers know exactly what's going on. It's a very quick, very efficient, and it's going into the messages that aren't getting lost, aren't getting cluttered in email, and they've had tremendous success. Once the COVID kind of business funding goes away, they're going to continue to use this service for security alerts, community events and activities, financing tips, interest rate updates, all sorts of different ways that customers can get information from their bank very, very quickly. Next slide, please. those of you that experienced your teen years in the 80s might recognize these books, maybe late 70s. For those of you that don't, these are Choose Your Own Adventure. And if I had my screen on, I've got actually a half a dozen of these books that my mother found up in the attic from when I was a kid. But these books allowed for you to read up to a certain point, and then it gave you an option. Do you want to go through the door, or do you want to run back to the courtyard? Do you want to board the spaceship, or do you want to take the shuttle back to Earth? And so as you read these, your imagination brought you to different endings. And a chatbot is very similar to that, in my opinion, because a chatbot really is creating a chat adventure. You take the information that you've gotten from Google Analytics, from your FAQs, from conversations with your employees, and then, as it shows on the next slide, you go into a chatbot service and you map that adventure. Now, this is from another one of our partners, a company by the name of SharpSpring, but this is a free chatbot service that they released for all of the customers that are using the SharpSpring marketing automation service. And you can take those questions that you know customers want to know answers to and build those out in a decision tree. So this is very similar to the Choose Your Own Adventure. What brings you to our site today? What can I do for you? And at any point, if somebody wants to talk to a human being, it can provide instructions on how you can actually get to a human. But it's that adventure that we want to take our customers down. But the adventure is really a business-focused conversation that answers the questions that we know they're likely going to ask based off of history. Next slide, please. Technology is great at creating personalized information. And we've talked about personas and data mining your database and getting segmentation the right way. Jason Hendricks is a good friend of mine over at FinTech Forge. They do a lot of work with banks and are very FinTech kind of futuristic focused. And this is one of the quotes that I love from him. It talks about the difference between personalized and personable. And I'll paraphrase, but a technology can offer personalized information based off of parameters, but the humans are really where that personable relationship is going to take place. And if we're worried about Skynet taking over the world and technology really making humans obsolete, it's this quote that gives me kind of, hope for the future, that a computer is not going to give a very personable interaction. It's going to drop the ball at some point, and a human's always going to have to be there to pick up the pieces and to step right in. So as good as bots are and as good as technology is, don't ever forget the fact that the human component of this, the personalized, is great, but personable is a totally different experience, and that's where staff, your caring employees, really need to be there. Next slide. So the benefits of chatbots, hopefully these are pretty obvious, but certainly improved engagement and even qualification. And what I mean by that is, if somebody comes to your website and they indicate that they're interested in buying a house, or they're interested in booking an appointment, or they're interested in scheduling a visit from a roofing expert, we already know that, well, that person's interested in a roof. They're not interested in siding or windows or air conditioning. They're interested in a roof. So we've got the bot that allows for that qualification to happen, and it moves that customer through the journey that much faster. It increases our conversion rates because when we're proactively sending out information or we're using bots, they get paid attention to a lot more. They get clicked on a lot more because they're more personable, they're more discoverable. And because bots are so much more efficient at doing things than humans, a lot of the mundane efforts that humans were having to do can be rolled into a bot and make sure that the price or the costs are reduced by having a human do it by themselves. So the last success story that I want to just briefly share, and then we'll get into the uncanny valley, is in the book I talk about Amtrak. And I think of Amtrak as kind of an older type of transportation, although I've talked to some folks that have done cross-country trips and have been very impressed. But they have a bot on their website. Her name is Julie. It's very clear that she's a bot. She's not a human. But you can see just some of the numbers when Julie is involved. The ROI is tremendous. She is much better at intelligently making the right recommendations to generate more money for Amtrak. expenses are reduced because she's taking on a bulk of the conversations that they would have had to have paid employees for. She's answering over 5 million questions a year. And compared to human transactions, she produces more revenue than a human doing the same reservation. So a tremendous advantage, and that allows for the human interactions to have that much more value, because then a human can spend a lot more time with someone that has something complex that really needs attention. So the last thing we're going to talk about is this uncanny valley. The uncanny valley is really the experience of you're working with a technology, but you don't really know it up front. And the example that I like to give is, many of you may have received robocalls where the phone rings, you answer it, somebody on the other line says, "Hey, thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?" And you answer back, "Yeah, I can hear you just fine." "Oh, great. Well, I'm calling you today because I wanted to share with you some information." And you might think at the beginning that it's a real person, that you're talking to a human. But as the conversation goes, you pause and then they kick right in. You now have entered the uncanny valley where technology is pretending to be a human and it fails. And when that happens, it has a much more detrimental experience to the visitor than a benefit. And so what you want to make sure you do, just like on Amtrak and a lot of the others, is you make it clear and conspicuous that, hey, you're talking to a bot. I'm really smart, but I was not as smart as, the employees that work here. Even states like California have enacted legislation that requires businesses disclose that you're talking to a technology as opposed to a real human. So stay out of that uncanny valley. Don't pretend or don't think that the bots are going to replace us. We need to be very transparent that the technology is there, but we're going to be there also. And if you're not able to work 24/7, which humans can't, at least provide instructions or expectations to say, sorry, everybody in the office is home with their family. It's 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, but we'll get back in touch with you the first business day. So they know what the expectation is to be able to talk to one of your valued employees. So the wrap-up slide is next, just kind of painting the picture of the different things that we talked about. Make sure that you're talking with your audience, not just to them. Open up the opportunity for that conversation to be able to give them feedback, and they give you feedback. Understand what your questions are and how you need to answer them, and then develop that flow. Come up with a flow chart. Do it on a whiteboard or even a piece of paper. If somebody asks this question, what are the typical responses? And do that flow chart. Automate what you can at that point, because that's where your cost savings and your efficiencies are going to come into play. But certainly do not ignore the human element. That's where you're going to really add value. Personal versus personalized. That's going to be a winner at the end of the day. So that concludes the slides. I'm going to open up my webcam here to hop back on, and maybe I'll even show everybody my books just to prove that I got them.
Excellent. And
cool.
Some great tips. We're getting some great comments and some good questions coming through here. And I know you've agreed to stay after the top of the hour just in case, so that we can get to a handful more questions. Before we get to that, I do want to remind people that our best-selling book, Digital Minds, is available on Amazon. And so you can learn more about conversational marketing as well as the other chapters that we're talking about. I also want to remind you about the fact that if you've got questions about this or any of the other digital elements, reach out to your consultant. I mean, we want you to lean on us. We're here to help you through this time. And certainly they can talk to you about bots, or they can talk to you about any of the other things that we're working on. And if you don't have that, you can if you don't know who invited you, you can reach out to us at head office there at contact@wsiworld.com. Also, just want to quickly remind you about our upcoming session next week, which is the same link. It's going to be on website conversions. And so chatbots are a great way to convert, increase conversions. That's one way, but there's a lot of other things. And we're going to go into that. And we know how important it is not only just to get traffic to our sites and so forth, but the key thing is how to convert that. And you're going to learn some great tips on increasing conversions. And that's with Chuck Bankoff, based out of California. So let's get to some Q&A here. We had a question there, which was, for B2B companies, is there a certain number of, let's say, the question was, hey, we've only got 10,000 people that we're really connected to or reaching out to. Does it make sense for us to have a bot? And specifically, it was a question around B2B, the B2B industry. I don't know if you have any kind of opinions on that.
Well, whether it's B2B or B2C, at the end of the day, I like to think of it as P2P, person to person, because what you're really trying to do as a business, even if you're selling to other businesses, you're selling to individuals that work in those businesses that are going to have questions, that are going to want answers, they're going to want to do their research. And so if you make it easy for them to dig in, whether it's a B2B or a B2C, the fact that you've got 10,000 connections, I think is great. That's a lot more than many of the clients that we have in their email list. But putting something out there really depends on what type of communication you're planning on. But you could have one conversation with a high value customer that feels that they have now a personal relationship with you that could result, I don't know what industry you're in, could result in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars because that capability is there. One of the stories that I also share in the book is, a mother shared when she was selecting a dentist for her children, she chose the dentist that gave her the ability to schedule online and to have a chat with the agents because she was a busy mom and she just wanted to do everything through messaging. And there might have been other dentists in town that might even have been better, but the convenience that she had through the messaging capability was what she used as her decision process. And who knows how many kids are going to go through that dentist? Do they need braces, orthodontic work? There could be hundreds of thousands of dollars coming their way as a result of them just offering chat through their website to be able to talk.
Great. We have a question because we talked about Facebook Messenger and the number of the growth of the messaging. Is there an easy way to sort of implement Facebook Messenger into your website?
So Facebook Messenger allows for you, it's relatively new within the last probably year or two. It allows for you to take the code from Facebook Messenger and you can put it into your website. You put a little snippet of code into might be something that your WSI consultant would help you with. But you can also go and you can use that service that I mentioned earlier, Mobile Monkey, because the Messenger native code is great because it gives you that communication. But when you deploy that through a technology like Mobile Monkey, you have the benefit of then a dashboard that allows for you to create some of those decision trees. And then you also have the ability to roll in text messaging. So now your employees, whether it's a text message that's come in, you want to send a distribution out that way, or if it's chat through your Facebook page or on your website, you've got one unified portal that individuals within your business can manage all of those conversations. So I would say, try it with a native implementation, but when you really want to get serious, look at a firm like Mobile Monkey and to be able to incorporate some bells and whistles into that conversation. For sure.
And that's certainly something, if you're wondering about that, as WSI, they're a partner with us. And so we can certainly help you with that. Because some questions just relating to, and this was a really good question about one of the comments that they've just implemented live chat on their site, and they're finding that there's about a window, but instead of having somebody kind of waiting around for these live chats, what would be a recommendation? And maybe this is where a bot is great, that they're taking over a lot of that chat. Yep. And maybe only at a certain point a human is coming in.
Sure. So if you've got live chat on your site now, you should have the ability to mine what sort of questions people are asking you. And when you start seeing some similarities, much like what we saw with Heartland when we pulled their Q code into the Google Analytics, you'll want to figure out, does your chat service have the ability to create automated bots that give you the ability, because not every live chat platform does that. So you want to make sure that if it doesn't, ask them what it would take to get it added, if it's on their roadmap, or if that's something that is a necessity, you might want to look at maybe a vendor switch. But being able to automate some of those common questions through a bot so that you don't have to answer everything yourself, And then a lot of the platforms that are out there, I know Mobile Monkey does, but they provide a mobile capability where you can even respond after hours. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be a slave to your phone on a Sunday afternoon and be responding to your website chat, because that's the expectation you'll need to make as a business to determine if that's going to make sense. But a bot sounds like it would be a real good benefit for you if you can take some of the data that it's telling you of common questions and just answer those right off the bat, and then provide the option to get a human involved. Just make sure that it's designed and structured and written in a way that it doesn't give the perception like you're hiding behind the bot, that you're doing the bot as a benefit for your visitors, not as an excuse to have to answer their questions.
Right. No, that's great. And as far as the bot, like, so at what point, because we've got a couple of questions here that are sort of similar, at what point does it make sense for a human to jump in? Like, is there a best practice with, the bot goes through, 3 iterations of questions? I mean, in your case, you purchased your bike light without a human interaction, but is
Right.
there in general a best practice for, at what point a human does jump in?
My gut response to that is if you try to program that into the bot, you'll probably fail. What I think you need to do is recognize or provide options during that process to say, did that answer your question? And if they say no, then you provide the option to say, would you like to try again? Click here. Would you like to talk to somebody? Click here. So you need to give the visitor the opportunity to ask for the human. If you take the bot technology and say, well, this is when I think I'm going to interject a human, you might call that wrong. And somebody might be going through. Conversely, I don't know how many different conversations I had with this bike light, but I bet I answered probably 7 or 8 questions. You might not want to have 7 or 8 questions on a regular site before a human gets involved. But I didn't need a human. Everything was very easy for me. So the number of questions I don't think is relevant. I think you need to make it very clear how somebody can get a human if they need it. It's just like a phone number, and then if you need, a lot of times I'll just dial up a phone and I'll just say operator, because I don't want to go through the tree.
Right.
And so give them that ripcord that they can pull at any point in time to get to a human.
Okay, great. And maybe one last question, and there's sort of a couple of related questions just around, is this a complex process for a business to implement something like this? Like if I'm a small business, is this going to be cost prohibitive for me to be able to put something like this on my site?
So, cost is relative in the eyes of the beholder. So I don't know cost wise, so that's really going to depend on your investment tolerance. I would say for less than $100, you could very easily put a very powerful bot to play, and the complexity will grow over time. I talked about crawl, walk, run. What you want to do is figure out what are the 4 or 5 main questions. And there's no harm in releasing a bot, putting it on your website and saying, hey, I'm the new WSI bot. I'm just learning, but chances are I might know the answer to one of your questions. How can I help you? And just kind of letting it set the stage. It's like a new employee at your organization. You wouldn't expect them to have a conversation with your highest value customer right out of the gate. But what you would do is you bring them in, you let them learn, they understand the business a little better, and then over time, after a year or 2 years, you start introducing them to some higher value customers, some bigger relationships, some more income potential. And it's that same mentality for a bot. Don't feel like you got to eat the elephant and deploy this 13-layer, 25-question AI-driven bot right out of the gate. Start simple, answer basic questions, and then give them a quick and easy way to talk to a human. And over time, that requirement to pull a human in is going to get less and less and less, and your bot's going to get smarter and smarter and smarter.
Right. So it's not something that is, I mean, obviously it's there's many degrees of what you're trying to do with this technology, but for
Right.
something that's very basic, you could get started with relatively little cost. Okay, great.
Yep.
So I know we're at we've gone 10 minutes past, and so for those of you that we didn't get to your question, certainly if you're your consultant will reach out to you just to get to some of those questions as well. The recordings available and so forth. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, reach out to your local consultant so that they can help you through this process and figure out if this type of technology makes sense for you. And also just a reminder to join us for our next session on website conversions with Chuck Bankoff. That's going to be a great session. And I also want to give you the good news about the fact that because of the great response that we've had with this series, we've actually added 3 more sessions. So we're going to be doing a session on analytics. We're going to be doing a session on SEO. And then also towards the end of May, kind of looking at your post-COVID-19 digital plan. So thanks very much, everybody, for the amazing feedback that we've had on this. We're glad that it's actually provided a lot of great help and information for businesses. That's what we wanted to do. And so, hopefully you'll be able to join us for these other 3 great sessions, and you're going to get notification about that as well. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Eric, for the great content and information for everybody. I think it was a really informative session. And,
my pleasure as always.
Yes. And just want to say, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.